this motherboard that I'm going to be using for UNRAID. I think I finally got all of the bits I need assembled to actually start using it. So I've got the board, obviously, the same as before, and that's already got the CPUs and the RAM installed. So I've got some coolers that I got. They're CoolerMaster coolers. I'm hoping that 2 of them will fit because they're relatively compact. They look pretty compacted. So I'm hoping that 2 will fit, hopefully pointing either upwards or towards the I/O to vent the heat out of the case. I've got coming, I managed to find a old Matrox G550 PCI 1x graphics card. So I managed to get that. So that was found in a cupboard, but it's not made it to actually here yet. So I'll install that at a later point. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at these coolers. So I've got 2 of them to put in. Let's see if I can get it open. So my plan is to put one on, and if it looks like both will fit, then I'll obviously install the other one as well. But if it looks like maybe they're not going to work, might be able to send one back, but we'll see. I'm reasonably certain that they don't actually extend much beyond the side of the socket, so in which case we should be all right. They're compact coolers for this CPU, so they're designed for ITX cases, which I think is probably they look about the right kind of size. Because these are low power CPUs, I think I said they were 50, but I think they're 65 watts at full load. That should help a little bit with the cooling. So obviously not going to generate as much heat as say 120 or 130 watt CPUs. Let's get rid of that. So let's have a look in this box. These are multi CPU socket compatible, so I need to find the right bracket. Which will probably be easier if I look in the manual actually. Which I have here. Okay. So I'm looking for screw down brackets by the looks of it. Which I believe is these. So it's this bracket. Goes on the bottom and then tightens up. I'll need to find the correct screw to mount it onto the bottom of the cooler itself. So there's a hole, you can see 2 holes to screw it into. Assume it's those, they look the right size. Fans feel a bit weird, they're like sort of glossy, almost feel slightly rubbery, a bit strange. Okay. So it would appear that they go on like that. The magnetism on my screwdriver is not the best, so things do have a habit of falling off. Actually, I'll go through that and into this on the top, which is a bit easier. Let's do a kind of rationality test. Looks like it'll be okay. I'm not sure if these are one way only or if they actually fit in multiple directions, so we'll have a look in a minute. So they're a 4 heat pipe design, and looks like there's direct contact between the heat spreader and the heat pipes. You can kind of see that on there. Let's have a look. And they'll need to presumably come out to the edge. Yeah. Don't know if they just slide over or if you have to pop them free. So they'll definitely go that way. Will they go that way? Yeah, it looks square. So that's quite handy for me because I think it might be easier to fit them both so they're blowing upwards. And then there's a fan in the top of the case that will get rid of the heat. So I just need to remind myself which way that fan went on. Yeah, so they'll go like that basically. If it clears the RAM slots, may not. In which case they will have to go off to one side. Yeah, it should clear the RAM slot even, and yeah, so both can vent the air through the top of the case. Good way of knowing which way around the air goes out of a fan is that the side without any of the support structure is the intake side. There's always an arrow, so there's an arrow on there as well. So these two can mount, one there and then the next one here. So these are actually some of the cheapest coolers I could find as well, which is quite handy because with it being a relatively low power CPU, I didn't really need to spend enormous amounts of money on a fancy cooler, and hopefully they'll run reasonably quiet. The fan's speed controlled, and a lot of the time this system won't be under massive load, so I'm kind of hoping that it'll be reasonably quiet. It won't be silent. In my other server, which runs things like Plex and OwnCloud, which I don't know may end up on this eventually, that has a Be Quiet cooler, which is obviously very good but more expensive. So if you're interested, that's the cooler there, Hyper H412R, and I think it was about 15 quid or something like that. I don't know what its maximum thermal design power is. really says on the case, actually. I'll have a look in a minute. So screws. Normally I have a little tray for putting screws and stuff in, but I'm actually not going to be doing too much unscrewing, just the motherboard, I guess. But what I might do is use one of the boxes or something. Motherboard screws, I've got millions of them anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. Okay, so there's the other one, and that will obviously sit there. So now I need to put these on properly, obviously. So take that off. There's obviously a cover which you need to remove, protecting the bottom. And the same again on that one. And then presumably somewhere in here is some thermal grease, looks like it, yeah. So before I install them, I'm going to have a quick squint at the manual just to make sure I haven't missed something obvious. Doesn't look like it. All this looks pretty self-explanatory. It's always worth doing just in case there's like, I don't know, some kind of anti-vibration device or whatever. It could be something useful that you're supposed to install before you do this. I couldn't see anything, but it's always worth checking. As Gamers Nexus has proved, you can't overdo it on this stuff, but I tend to prefer less than sometimes they put on, just because it makes a bit of a mess everywhere. So I'm going to vent most of these towards the top of the case. I think that will be the best place for them, so I'll just place them on. And these things, they just lift and move. Actually, I'm just wondering if there is a spacer that is meant to be installed. Let's have a quick look. Yes, there is. So there are spacers which go on. It's not a big deal. So in back there they are. So these little spacers. If I just turn it a little bit. All the spacers look the same, so it doesn't look like there's a particular one for this board. There is a little doodad to tighten these up actually, so presumably that just goes on there, and then you just give it a quick turn. You don't need to over tighten these things as long as they're kind of stopped moving. And you've got them gripping nicely. You don't need to kind of absolutely crank them, and you risk damaging things if you do. Would have made sense to have done the one furthest away first, but not to worry. In fact, I could just pick this up. It's a useful check that I got enough stuff on it as well. Looks like once it squishes down that'll be enough, but I'll give it a spread it out a bit more. Maybe put a little bit on this side. It's a bit thin. Maybe a bit more on that one. This is the thermal paste that came with the board, the cooler obviously, but if you had a really high performance, well, high TDP CPU, you might want to buy something that you know works really well. There's always one that doesn't want to go in. Quite like this as a design, it's quite neat. Relies on the existing socket hardware, which most Intel coolers do. It's often the AMD ones where you end up changing the backplate, which isn't a big problem unless the board is installed in a case where there's no access point, in which case it can be a bit of a pain in the arse. Give it a squidge and then have a quick check. That looks okay. Don't need to put too much pressure on doing that. It just settles it a bit. And then the usual kind of do this in alternate corners to build the pressure up. Once it grips, you can just go around opposite sides. Until it stops. This just ensures that you've got the correct mounting pressure. Gone. And that one's in. That's in. Pretty solid. Let's do this one. And again. Give it a bit of a squidge round, spread out that thermal paste. Obviously this will happen when you tighten it down as well, but just helps it spread out. These are quite nice screws actually, because they have a rim on them. One of the things that you have to be a little bit careful of with these things is that you don't slip off when you're pushing down and stab some of the components. But both in terms of you don't actually need that much pressure to get these to the top of the thread, but also that rim just gives you a bit of extra confidence that you're not going to shoot off and spear your RAM chip or something. There was a particular generation of coolers where you kind of had to poke it down with a screwdriver, and it required rather more force than I was comfortable with, and the prospect of causing irreparable damage to your motherboard was quite high. So I'm slightly concerned about the distance between these two. Now I've just noticed that it might be that the fan shrouds don't quite fit, but let's have a go. That's obviously, that one's on. Let's drop that down a bit more. But can we get two on? That's the question. With a little bit of bending, I think we'll be alright. That's pretty close though. Let's see. Let's have a look to see if they're actually touching. they're not. They're touching at the base, but to be honest, I think that's fine. Let's take it off again and see how much it relaxes by. Yeah, it's only putting a tiny bit of pressure on the board. Don't think it's going to be anything to worry about. It's just that kind of plastic is a bit of, it's got a bit of styling on it that, to be honest, it doesn't really need. It's not the best angle for that one, is it? But it'll do. It'll go over the top. So the fan headers are behind here, so one will go round, this one will go over the top, or I could just flip it. I'll flip it a bit. Let's see if I can get it off. Down there, so now it can thread underneath basically. Actually, if you offset them slightly, they actually fit a bit better. So you can see it's just slightly lower now. It means that they don't butt up against each other, which is kind of handy. So that's fine. And that reaches. Just plugging the fan header at the back here. It reaches quite neatly in under there. Now this one's actually going to go to a fan controller because I'm going to I've got a fan controller to plug into that header that'll then control a whole load of other fans, and that's because one of the problems with this particular motherboard is that it only has 2 4-pin and 2 3-pin fan headers, which is not ideal. So that's it for the motherboard, other than the battery. And I'll just pop and get one of those actually. So that was one of those excellent examples of where you know you've got something but you can't figure out where on earth it is. Anyway, got there in the end. So it's just a standard 2032 CR2032 battery that goes in there. So in theory that should be it. Let's have a look at this fan controller. So this was the cheapest kind of fan adapter I could find that would allow me to essentially add a load of fans onto one of the CPU headers. And they would be speed controlled with the CPU, at least that's the theory anyway. Let's have a look. So there it is. You can see it's got a, I think there's a SATA power input, and then it can control up to 9 fans, or is it even more than that? And then it inputs, so it takes the sensor off the fan header that would be a CPU. Presumably that is the input. Some zip ties and some sticky. It's an enormous box that I got the delivery in. It's the guarantee, so let's have a look. Yeah, so basically that's how it works. So we'll install that in the case. So the next phase really is that. Get the case on here and put this in and then test it. Quite pleased with those fans in the end. So they're if you do offset them a bit, so this one is just slightly lower, sits a bit lower on the cooler there, and then they mesh quite nicely together. And they'll spin, and they don't obstruct any of the RAM slots, so no problem with installing another set of RAM. And it's pretty close, but it's definitely yeah, you would get something into there if you wanted to. Whether or not I'll ever upgrade the RAM, I don't know. You can see it at the back, and that just tucked under. I didn't unwrap it because I don't want it long. It's just on that header, and that one would go there, but obviously we're gonna put the commander on. So I'll put all this stuff away. Don't any of this. I'll probably keep one box with all this junk in for these, just in case in the future I want to reuse these coolers in a different system. So in here you can see the old system. This is a really nice cooler. This is a Zalman, which I think is a company that doesn't exist anymore. Which is a really nice AM2 or 3 cooler. It probably would fit an AM4 actually, because I think it's still the same bracket size basically. Whether or not the mounting pressure will be exactly right, don't know. The power supply I'm actually going to change. So this is a 650 watt power supply. I'm going to upgrade it to an 850 because I just think that might need a bit more headroom for hard drives. You can see all the hard drives here. So I've got 2 SSDs for cache, one 4 terabyte parity drive, which looks like that one, and then 3 data drives so far. There's not as much room for upgrades as you might think in a case of this size really. So the old style of this case had more room actually. But I intend to replace the SSDs with M.2 drives, although I have heard that that board has problems with some M.2 drives. So, well, we'll see. And then I would have basically 4 slots free, so those 2 will be replaced, and then there's 2 there as well, which will keep me going for the time being. Could put things up here obviously as well, which is a 5.25 inch bay, which actually has a DVD drive, which never gets used. Probably just leave it in there, to be honest with you. I don't even know if it's plugged in. It seems to be plugged into a... Yeah, it's plugged into an extender. Right, so let's get this out. Oh, it's a bit stuck. Saying I'll leave the DVD drive in. I probably won't plug it in actually, because it would use up one of the available slots to put this back in. Actually, that looks like a PCI card, so it won't go in anyway. So I'll just leave it in there to take up space. What I have noticed is that there's only one fan on the back, where I thought I had fans at the top here. So I might swap that fan around as well to vent the heat out the top. And if I have problems, I've got this other panel which you can see, well, two other panels potentially, to add in additional fans. But I'm not expecting the system to run that hot, so I don't think it's going to be an issue. There's two intake fans in here that predominantly cool those hard drives, obviously. What I could do is, I'm not sure how this stuff attaches, but if it just screws in, I could swap it. I'll have a fan and some holes, and then put the soundproofing there. Got all the screws. Nope. I think this case has front panel USB 3, which I don't see a cable for it. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so that'll be useful. Oops. The GPU that's in here is a slightly unusual one, in that it's only an 8 times PCIe, which is plenty for the actual card itself, which is, I believe, yeah, it's a NVIDIA GT710, which is not a bad card for these kind of servers because it doesn't use too much power. But I am replacing this with that Matrox card once I managed to get it here. Seems to be a bit stuck. There we go. So yeah, this is an old PCI SATA card. Looks like it has probably some kind of software RAID on it that I wouldn't trust, and 4 ports. It's actually not too bad. It's probably quite useful for just, you know, bunging a few hard drives on, but won't fit on the new motherboard anyway, so that'll have to be replaced. But my plan is to get some kind of SAS type controller that'll probably something that'll take 8 HBA drives will be good. Same that I've got in my other server, basically. Okay, I think that is all of the, yeah. So there's the old one, an old AM3 quad-core 604E, I believe, with, I think it's 16 gigs of RAM, so no longer required, but probably for sale in the not too distant future on eBay. I'll just pop it over here out of the way for now. That's one thing I remembered, is that the top screw slot of this case has at some point got cross-threaded, so that has to be replaced with a plastic spacer instead, which isn't too bad. So the next thing I'll need is to figure out where to move the motherboard headers to, but first I'll just take this out actually. It's not a bad power supply, that I'll keep it for sure, but it's a bit dusty. But the new board requires another CPU 8-pin. It only has one, and also I think it just potentially needs a bit more capacity in the future. Although maybe not, I don't know. 650 for a relatively modest computer and a bunch of hard drives is not too bad. So I'll get those cables out and I can stand it up, but actually maybe I'll do it now quickly. Of course, I'm assuming that this new board's going to actually work. If it doesn't, I've just created a lot of work for myself putting all this back together. But I'll probably put it back together with the new power supply anyway, so, or rather different power supply because it's not new. Alright, that's a bit tidier. Swap the air shields. So it looks like I can swap this around with the insulation. So fortunately, this board, this case rather, used to have a E80X board in it, so it looks like all of the required headers, screws are actually already there. I will actually just unplug that out of the way, and also that. These should be fine. Let's quickly. So that one will be comes out further away. I think that one needs to go, and actually no, that one stays. No, I think that one probably goes there actually. Goes like that one. Over there, either actually. It's a bit of a non-standard layout, so I think I'm going to be a bit short on screws. Just hold it down. Let's have a look. there'll be one more here. So those two, that one, hopefully that one, hopefully that one, nothing in between, and those two, and two at the back. With a bit of luck. Let's have a look. I'm a bit off. It's not as big as I thought it was, so all these need to come forward. So that's probably not a bad thing actually. So that one into there. That one into there. How's that then? So we've got one there, one there, one there, one there, one there, three at the back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. It's always worth checking because you don't want a mounting point just on the back of the board. 7, 8, and then plastic riser in the corner. So I might have, that might not have been very easy to follow, or it might have not had enough audio to be worth putting in, but basically just had to spend a bit of time there making sure that as many mounting points line up as possible, and it is slightly non-standard layout, so there is a few missing, but there's enough, there's plenty to make sure it's in the right place. But the last thing you want is a mount just resting on the back of the board, because obviously you don't know what it's going to be resting on, so it's always a good idea to count the number of headers, compare it to the number that you can see actually mounted in the case. Just screw it in now. The main thing is there's a good number around the coolers, so they won't be bending the board by hanging, and also there's a decent number around the PCIe slots, which is the only other place where you can have a lot of weight hanging off the board with graphics cards. Should be fine. So I've got them all. 1, 2 up there, 3 there, one more at the back here. The audio header's in a slightly odd place on this, but I'm not going to plug in the front panel audio because I don't use it anyway. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's relatively stable. I'm just thinking if I turn that fan round, that might actually reach one of those 3-pin headers. It should be handy. So I'll give that a quick turn around. So the question is, will it do it in that slot, or will it need to be in the... I reckon I'll do it from that slot, which is where I'd rather it was. So then presumably go more directly up. These cases are quite nice. They're quite well designed and they're quite quiet because of the soundproofing. They are extremely heavy when they're full, which is sort of something to bear in mind. If you fill it full of hard drives, it's quite hard to move. Okay, put the graphics card back in. That slot for now will do. Front pin buttons, so I have this thing where they're labelled, which is quite handy, so I can just plug them in, assuming they haven't changed them randomly. Most motherboard manufacturers follow the same pattern. Doesn't say which is plus and which is minus. Well, I'll guess. Can always change it back. Actually, it might be... It only has one light, so I think what I'll do is I'll plug it into the hard drive. It'll flash. Be a bit more useful. No, I won't. Change my mind. Hard drive activity is not actually that informative. Okay, and then someone warned me that the connectors on this board aren't actually glued down, so be a bit careful putting these in. Doesn't matter what order they go in. UNRAID probably uses UUID for the... the drives or something, so that you can just swap them around. Let's do a couple more somewhere. There they are. Typical. I would put the ones that are furthest down and leave them till last, wouldn't I? What I'll do is I'll swap one and that. So if they're not stuck down, you need to be particularly careful with the ones that are clipped, because because obviously they won't release. Right, that's those back in. What's that? Is that USB 2? That's the audio, not interested in that. That is front panel USB, which is right next to the front panel buttons. And then the last one, USB 3. Be particularly careful with. There we go. I might cable manage that a bit more actually. Let's gingerly take it out. Right. Power supply next. This is from the drive. Don't need that. Shove it through. I'll probably just tuck that out the back as well somewhere. So tuck that through as well. I'm not going to pull these tight because there's no need to really. I don't think airflow is going to be a big problem. And if those ports are a bit fragile, I'd rather just have plenty of slack. Right. So everything is nicely installed. Power supply. So the power supply I'm putting in is 850 watt Enermax. It's semi-modular, so it's not completely modular. It's a bit of a beast. And here it is. I'm going to have it sucking air in from the bottom. There's a grill on the bottom of this, and it's quite well where it is not on the carpet or anything, so there's a filter, and also with it not being on the carpet it'll be fine. I can do this. Once you get one screw in, you're sorted. Okay. One in the top. Quite a lot of play in this case, so it took me a little time to get the bottom screw holes lined up. There we go. I still can't see where the fourth screw goes in or not. Oh, there it is. There we go. It's not the best light. So all of the power connectors are up here at the top. So hopefully I've bought the right extenders, so I won't have to have big snakes of cabling going across the top of the motherboard. We'll see. So this is the 24 pin extender. Put that on first. Will it fit through the hole? It's going to be close. Again with a bit of wiggling. And I've got two 8-pin ones as well. So one at the top there. Obviously you could, if you weren't bothered about the aesthetics, just shove them on top, but I thought it would potentially be quite a mess with the two coolers to have these going over the top. And extenders aren't that expensive, a couple of quid each. So it's not going to break the bank. I'm not going to bother putting this back on. I think the likelihood of it making much difference of sound dampening there is pretty slim. I'm going to have to monitor this for how much cooling it might need anyway. Right, turn this on its side. Right. So hopefully you can see enough of that. It's quite a big case. Right, let's tuck this out and then back through. Where should it come out? That's good. Again, I'm not going to have too much stress on that. Don't want to snap it off. Seems alright. There are more cables for this if I need them. First one I shall send through is the big one. Would it have made it on its own? Who knows? Let's have a look. It's not off the rubber. Knock the rubber cover off. It's not strictly necessary, but it's a bit nicer. Okay. It wouldn't have made it on its own. going to be tight. Ah, there we go. Don't want to fold the cable over too much, but it feels okay like that, so it should be right. Connect it together. There's quite a lot of cable going to be out the back there, if that's going to affect the case closing. Through as well. This one I'll send through the side there. And this fan I'll send out there and then back through here. And now I can't actually see where the fan header is, so I'll connect that up in a minute. So this looks like PCIe because they're handily not labelled, and some Molex. That one is labelled. Here we've got the two CPU ones, so I'll send them through first. It's got a 3-pin RPM header there. I think it's... So the 3-pin controllers on this don't have any power control. Oh, that's come out on its own. Look. That's interesting. I might end up putting in a USB card anyway, because I'd actually quite like to pass through those front ports to VMs, so I can see that a USB card would be useful in the future. So with these being PCIe for graphics, I'm just going to put them in the bottom. So I won't bundle them together, because I think that one will be better. Eventually I will have a graphics card for VMs in here, so I'm quite decided what to get. Look out for something cheap AMD. Okay, so there's a SATA that needs to go through. And I'll probably need another SATA at least. So have a look in this big bag of cables for another SATA one. There you go. May have been a good idea to plug this in before. They only go in one slot, so it's fine. Here we go. So the fan controller works off a SATA power, but because I've actually got Molex here and an adapter, I'm going to adapt this Molex, shove it through, because that means I don't have to plug in another cable, so it's already plugged in. It's a bit of a rat's nest at the bottom here, but never mind. Okay, so this goes in the fan connector on the board, and then straight out of there. This one can go straight out the back. So I've got capacity to power far more fans than I need, because the two front ones are on a splitter. This one will plug into the board, and these two, well, one's in the controller and one's on the board. So, but it is quite likely that I might need another fan here. Don't think I'll need both, but I think two fans at the top would be useful. So once I get that different graphics card, I think I'll add in an extra fan at the same time. So I'll just stick this down. So just to show you the disaster of my cable management. Is. So we've got the controller there, extensions. I wonder if I might just wrap that one around like that, actually, might be a bit better. This should help it lie flat. It should be alright. What I might do is just tag that one up a little bit out of the way. This came with a few cable ties. So just get that to go through. Hopefully stop it from catching that. I think that'll just clear the door. There is quite a lot of padding on the door, so hopefully it'll be okay. And these should just go flat. Let's tuck that one in there. So I think it'll be alright. Those are all connected. Right, it's time to boot this up, see if it works. So that's a little bit tricky from here, because I don't have any monitors down here, so I'm going to actually plug it into the TV, which is a bit unorthodox, but it will require that I move the cameras and stuff like that, so I'm going to stop recording for a bit. Okay, so this is the moment of truth. Try and switch it on. Apologies for the slightly cockeyed viewing angle. Something's happening. Might have been a good idea to turn on the TV. I'm pressing delete because I assume that'll be the one to make it drop into the BIOS. Aha! So it lives. Let's see what we've got then. So all the memory has been detected, so you can see that there, 65 gigabytes. It's a good start. Set the clock. I believe it is the 30th. It's not set on fire yet, so that's also a good sign. Is it page up? Nope. Maybe just type it in. You just type it in. 10th. 2020. And it is approximately 4:26. Okay, so it would be good to get a bit more information about the system to check that it had actually correctly identified what the CPUs are. I'm just going to check the focus on the feed. Looks okay. It's obviously not going to be the best, but anyway. Let's have a look at through these then. Can leave that one as it is. That one doesn't matter. CPU temperature is 36. That's fine. Smart function is enabled. Smart TM. Fans seem to be spinning. Yeah, that's fine then. Probably leave all this the same. What I'm actually looking for though is the boot options. Fine. I am interested in the turbo option, which is somewhere in here. USB enabled. That's probably fine as well. Processor maybe. So we've got two processors. They've both been detected. They look like they're the correct ones. 2650Ls version 3s. Hyperthreading is on. I'm going to leave that on. Leave that. Debug off. Hardware. That all looks fine. Don't need that. Don't need that. Turbo is on actually. So I think it needs to be on C6. I don't know which one though. let's try that. Leave that as it is. I think all of this stuff I can leave the same. Don't need that. So I need to plug in my USB for it to detect it. It's detected all the hard drives though. That Toshiba one, I believe. Toshiba ones are the 3 terabyte ones. Those are the T cache drives, and that's the 4 terabyte parity drive. So what I'm going to do is put in my UNRAID USB stick and give it a quick reboot. And I've got a network cable here as well, so we should see it go up. Took me a little while to find that network cable. So obviously this is going to come up on a different IP address as my server normally is, so I'll have to reconfigure that in my router. But let's try this. It's reasonably noisy. I might have to see which. The fan's clearly ramped though. To see which fan it is that's so loud. So I want to go back into setup. Okay, pick that boot device. It's picked it already. Should be fine then. Let's see if it goes. Just take a little while to power cycle, as you've seen. So I'm pretty pleased with that. It all seems to have come together, touch wood, without any stress. And all the parts from their various different eBay sellers seem to be working fine. So let's see if it boots up. Put it in GUI mode, just so we can get a picture. I don't really need to plug the network in because I'm just going to shut it down again anyway, but never mind. It surprises me how long it takes for UNRAID to boot. I guess it's unpacking a lot of stuff on that USB stick, which maybe takes a bit of time, but it does seem rather slow. Perhaps I should have bought a faster USB stick. And there is UNRAID. This might be wrong because I think numlock is on. I don't know, it's fine. Okay, this looks very promising. So all of the hard drives are there. And this is not the easiest keyboard to scroll with. Cache drives are there as well. My storage is encrypted. If I hit start. should come up in a minute. Looks good. So I'll have a quick look here. Just have a quick scroll to VMs have come up. Well, they've started. Whether they've successfully loaded, I don't know. I'll look later. But this should be quite something to behold. Yeah, 24 cores, hyper-threaded. And 64 gigs of RAM. So yeah, that's obviously going to make a huge difference to my UNRAID system. I can do a lot more messing about with virtual machines. Somewhat questioning whether I need to, but need and want are two different things. Everything else seems to be healthy and fine. And you can see my shares have set up just as they were. Added a new Docker since I last did a video, FileZilla. Quite like FileZilla. The next VM I'm going to add probably RStudio. Might start playing around with that again. We used to have that at work, but now just use it on my desktop. It might be quite fun to have it on here. But yeah, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this now. I'm going to log in, well, I'll tidy up, leave it running for a bit. I'm going to log into my router, reassign the IP to this MAC address, and then the next time it reboots, it'll be in its proper place and it'll start serving out those shares on the IP that the other systems are expecting to see. But yeah, I would count that as a success. Pretty straightforward. Don't get CPU temperatures. I haven't installed a Docker to do that, but I probably will. But I don't think you get them by default. But that would be a nice thing to see, just to check. I'll go and prod them in a minute to see how they're doing. But yeah, awesome. Right, until next time. Thanks for watching.